This Samsung refrigerator is around 10 to 12 years old, and a few weeks ago started noticing that the door mullion would not move into the proper position sometimes. And if it doesn't, then that leaves a huge air gap right between the two doors for the cold air to escape, and that's not good for the food, the refrigerator, or the electric bill. My first thought was, well, must have a plastic piece that is broken. But on closer inspection, it looks like the pin is just missing the groove it's supposed to slide into. And it's a pretty deep groove, so that's a big miss. I looked over the mullion quite thoroughly. It and its hinges look fine. So that leaves me with the door itself as the problem. Here is a good indication of the problem. But this door height difference does have a bit of a backstory to it. After the refrigerator was installed, I remember seeing that the doors didn't line up. I don't remember it being this bad, and the more I think about it, I'm sure it wasn't. At the time, I just figured the installers didn't level the refrigerator or just the doors. But I remember checking, and the refrigerator was level, and only the right door is adjustable, and it was all the way down. Now, while the refrigerator was level, the doors were not level. I figured the door hinges were not in the exact right position, but didn't see any way to adjust them, so just left it alone. Now that is a pretty good difference. Almost 0.19 inches, so that is a lot of the problem. Here's the left door lower hinge. I'm going to use 3 craft sticks as a spacer. Can see that the door will move up quite a bit. Very hard to see, but there is a lower plastic bushing that sets on the hinge pin, and it fits into a plastic socket on the bottom of the door. So I need a spacer, but it needs to go under the lower plastic bushing. As I don't want to remove the door to fix this, my spacer needs to not have any turning forces on it, as it's going to have a slot in it. The lower bushing is quite hard to move. It's on the hinge pin pretty good. The hinge pin looks to have a pretty good taper at the bottom, which I kinda wish it didn't. I won't be able to make my spacer as wide as I would like. The hinge pin has at least one flat side to it, probably a flat on each side, so that keeps the lower plastic bushing from turning. The width of the hinge pin at the top is 0.52 inches. I can't measure across the flats, too much stuff in the way. Now the width of the pin at the bottom is almost 0.61 inches, so I will make my spacer's ID that size. The base part the plastic bushing sets on is around 0.86 inches in diameter. I will probably make my spacer's OD a little bigger than that. I don't see anything that it will bump into. So the gap with the 3 craft sticks is 0.1275 inches, well less than the 0.19 inch difference in the door edge height. But as I said, the doors never did align, and I know the bushing has not worn that much. I just want to raise it enough for the mullion to work properly, and give me a few years of wear time. I think I now have the dimensions I need to make my spacer. I want my spacer to be something close to this. The ID I want to be very close to the 0.61 inches. I'm going to give that dimension the utmost priority. For the OD, I want the 0.875 to be a minimum value. For the thickness, I've given it some thought, and I'm going to say 0.11 inches is a maximum. Somewhere between 0.1 and 0.11 inches I think will work well. To get the spacer on the hinge pin without removing the door is going to require a slot in the spacer. I'm not sure what would be a good slot size. I'm going to shoot for this and see how it goes. I don't have any large black acetal rod, so I'm going to make the spacer out of this 1-inch natural rod. I'll turn it so the gap is facing out, so won't be able to see much of it anyway. Of course, I don't have a 0.61 inch drill bit, so I'll make a starting hole with this 1/4 inch end mill. Then I'll move the end mill to the boring bar holder and use the pilot hole to align the end mill turn boring bar. I'll get the hole very close to 0.6 inches in diameter, and then move to the real boring bar to finish up the hole. It makes for a bit better finish, but the boring bar needs almost 1/2 inch hole to use it. That should be close enough. I've noticed the holes are a bit larger than what the caliper reads for an inside dimension, so I'd expect I'm a bit over the 0.61 inches, but not by much. I'll turn the 1-inch diameter down, 0.88 inches should be just fine. That will be a bit larger than the plastic bushing flange that will rest on it. Going to try and cut it off just short of the 0.11 inches. I think I may need to sharpen my cutoff tool. I'll trim the tiny bit of plastic left. Okay, that is plenty close. The pin on the mullion is right at the edge of the groove, so this should put it into the groove by 0.1 inches. More in the groove than it has been in years, I'm sure. Just used a razor knife to cut the gap. I'll use some 120 grit sandpaper to round the edges a bit, just so they don't catch on anything. So my gap ended up being a bit larger than I was planning on. I think it will be fine. I think the gap is still smaller than any part of the hinge pin. It's not real stiff. I probably should have made the OD a bit larger. I'll space it again with the craft sticks, then move the plastic bushing up to make room for my spacer. Well, that snapped in a lot easier than I expected. Definitely should have made the gap smaller. The mullion is working fine, but I now have a loud click when moving the door. Sounds like it's coming from the lower hinge area. It's not anything catching on the edge of my spacer. I was going to move the spacer like this anyway, but easy to see there's nothing bumping on the edges of it. Okay, I see where the noise is coming from. Watch this piece right here. Can see how it pops down, creating the click? Turns out the hinge has worn a groove into the plastic, and now with the door up higher, it is out of the groove, and as it moves a bit, then it snaps back into the groove, making the loud click. Looks like only one screw holds it on. I'll have to see if I can find a part number for it. Probably should replace it. Kinda looks like it might have to do with holding the door shut. But it's a pretty flimsy piece of plastic to put much pressure on the door. Until I can replace that piece, I've got to do something about that pop. I'm going to put a bit of VHB tape between the plastic arm and the bottom of the door. I think that will dampen the impact of the plastic snapping back. I do want to get the tape all the way under the door and over the plastic arm. Wow, that's a lot of difference. Just a tiny bit of noise now. Could let it just wear a bit, but I probably should see if I can find a new one and replace it. Now the door is working like it should. No more closing it and there being a gap letting the cold air run free. Can see the mullion pin is well up into the groove now. Hopefully we'll be good for another 10 years. I'm pondering unleveling the refrigerator to level the doors. My laziness tells me just to leave it well enough alone. But I'm curious, if you have one of these Samsungs, would you level for the doors or the refrigerator? Leave a comment if you have any thoughts on it. I was pretty pleased with my spacer fix. Door is working good, so I went to find the plastic arm that was popping, and it seems it's called a support door close. I haven't ordered one yet. Can't even hear the pop when I'm not right down at the hinge. But what I did find, my spacer fix comes in a kit. So I guess this is a pretty common problem for the Samsung doors. I thought I might have had a one-off where they misaligned the door hinges. If I had seen the spacer kit before I made my own, I probably would have just ordered it. Maybe. $10 for 4 different thickness spacers is a bit much. But I know I had a half an hour tied up in making my spacer. Though most of that time was spent looking for a black piece of plastic. I'm still sure at one point I bought a 1-inch diameter piece of black acetal rod. It's just hiding from me. But whatever the color of the plastic, I like making little pieces like this. One of the nice things about having the mini lathe. Makes stuff like this very easy. I don't see any signs of the spacer working its way off. Guess I won't know for sure for a year or so. But if I were to make the spacer again, I would alter 2 things. I would make the gap quite a bit smaller. Maybe try a little under 1/4 of an inch, or thereabout. And I would increase the OD maybe 0.05 inches, just to increase the stiffness of the spacer. Either making your own spacer or buying the kit, this is still much easier than taking the door off and replacing the bushing. That is for sure. Thank you for watching.